10 masturbation mistakes are silently destroying circulation and intimacy in men over 60, and most have no idea it's happening. A 68-year-old retired teacher collapsed during what he thought was harmless stress relief. No heart attack, no stroke, just complete circulatory failure in his pelvic region. I'm Dr. Grace Miller, and after 40 years treating men's health, I've seen this pattern destroy lives. The first mistake I see destroying men's circulation after 60 is one that seems completely harmless on the surface, rushing straight into stimulation without any warm-up period. Most men have no idea that what worked perfectly fine in their 30s and 40s can become dangerous after 60. Many men come to my office describing a troubling pattern. They'll mention chronic pelvic discomfort, reduced sensitivity, or a nagging ache that seems to have no clear cause. When I dig deeper into their habits, I often discover they're treating their body the same way they did decades ago, jumping immediately into intense stimulation without allowing their circulation system time to respond properly. Here's what's happening inside your body that no one ever explains. After 60, your arteries naturally lose some of their elasticity. The smooth muscle cells in your blood vessel walls become stiffer, and your body's production of nitric oxide, the chemical that helps blood vessels dilate, begins to decline. When you suddenly demand intense blood flow to the pelvic region without any gradual buildup, you're essentially asking aged, less flexible vessels to perform like they're still young. The physical consequences accumulate slowly, which is why this mistake goes unnoticed for so long. Each time you rush the process, you create tiny microtraumas in the delicate blood vessels of the penis. These microscopic injuries may not cause immediate pain, but over months and years, they lead to scar tissue formation, reduced blood vessel flexibility, and progressively diminished sensitivity. The very organ that depends most heavily on healthy blood flow becomes quietly damaged by the sudden demands you're placing on it. The emotional impact often hits harder than the physical symptoms. Men begin to notice that sensations feel muted, that arousal takes longer to achieve, or that the experience lacks the intensity it once had. This creates a destructive cycle where anxiety about performance leads to even more rushed, forceful approaches, which only accelerates the underlying damage. The solution is surprisingly simple but requires a fundamental shift in approach. Before any direct stimulation, spend 3 to 5 minutes allowing your body to gradually transition into an aroused state. This might involve gentle touch elsewhere on your body, focused breathing, or simply taking time to mentally engage with the process. Think of it as allowing your circulation system to wake up and prepare for increased blood flow demands. This gradual warm-up period gives your blood vessels time to dilate naturally, ensures adequate blood flow reaches the area before intense stimulation begins, and reduces the shock to your cardiovascular system. The difference in both sensation and long-term vascular health can be remarkable. But even when men slow down their approach, I've discovered they often make another critical error that restricts the very oxygen their body needs during arousal. This second mistake involves something as basic as breathing, yet it's unconsciously sabotaging circulation in ways that might surprise you. Here's something that might shock you. Most men over 60 unconsciously hold their breath during climax, and this single habit is quietly strangling their circulation in the most critical moments. When I ask men to pay attention to their breathing during arousal, they're often stunned to realize they've been essentially suffocating themselves for years. Research from cardiovascular studies shows us exactly why this matters so much after 60. During sexual arousal, your body needs a 40–60% increase in oxygen delivery to maintain proper blood flow to the pelvic region. When you hold your breath, you're cutting off this oxygen supply precisely when your body needs it most. It's like trying to run a marathon while holding your breath. Your performance suffers, and the strain on your system increases dramatically. The science behind this is both fascinating and concerning. Oxygen is essential for nitric oxide production, the molecule responsible for relaxing blood vessel walls and allowing them to dilate. When you deprive your body of oxygen during arousal, nitric oxide production plummets. Your blood vessels can't open properly, circulation becomes restricted, and the very foundation of healthy erectile function begins to crumble. I frequently see men who report experiencing dizziness, lightheadedness, or even a tingling numbness during or immediately after climax. They often dismiss these symptoms as normal signs of aging, but they're actually warning signals that their breathing patterns are creating dangerous oxygen deficits during arousal. The physical consequences extend far beyond the immediate moment. Repeated oxygen deprivation during sexual activity leads to progressively weaker blood vessel flexibility. Your body begins to associate sexual arousal with stress and oxygen debt rather than relaxation and increased circulation. Over time, this creates a pattern where erections become less reliable, sensitivity decreases, and the entire experience feels more effortful and less satisfying. The emotional toll often runs deeper than men expect. When basic bodily functions like breathing become unconsciously disrupted during intimate moments, it creates an underlying anxiety about sexual performance. Many men develop a fear that their bodies are betraying them, that their masculine vitality is slipping away. This anxiety then creates even more tension and breath restriction, perpetuating the cycle. The solution requires conscious retraining of something that should be automatic. Throughout arousal, and especially approaching climax, focus on maintaining deep, rhythmic breathing. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 counts, hold briefly, then exhale through your mouth for 6 counts. This pattern ensures continuous oxygen flow to your tissues while also activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes relaxation and healthy circulation. Practice this breathing technique outside of sexual contexts first. During daily activities, notice when you unconsciously hold your breath during concentration or stress, and consciously return to rhythmic breathing. This trains your body to maintain proper oxygen flow even during intense experiences. But even men who master proper warm-up and breathing often fall into another circulation-damaging trap. The frequency of their activities, which seem perfectly normal in younger years, may now be quietly depleting the very systems their intimacy depends on. Think back to your daily routines from decades past. What seemed perfectly sustainable at 30 or 40 might now be slowly draining your body's reserves without you realizing it. The third critical mistake I encounter involves men maintaining the same frequency of sexual activity they had in younger years, not understanding that their recovery systems have fundamentally changed. A common complaint I hear centers around emotional numbness and diminished satisfaction. Men describe going through the motions but feeling disconnected from the experience, as if they're watching themselves from a distance. When I explore their patterns, I often discover they're engaging in daily or near-daily masturbation, treating it like a routine maintenance activity rather than recognizing their body's need for restoration time. The hormonal reality of aging creates a completely different landscape for sexual recovery. After 60, your testosterone production follows a longer, more gradual cycle. Your dopamine receptors, which create the sense of pleasure and satisfaction, require more time to reset between intense stimulation. Most importantly, the blood vessels in your pelvic region need 48 to 72 hours to fully recover from the increased blood flow demands of sexual arousal and climax. Studies on male sexual physiology show that men over 60 who engage in daily sexual activity often develop what researchers call circulation fatigue. This isn't simply being tired. It's a measurable decrease in blood vessel responsiveness and efficiency. Your cardiovascular system, which now works harder to maintain normal circulation throughout your body, becomes overtaxed when constantly called upon for the intense blood flow redirection that sexual activity requires. The physical consequences manifest as a gradual dulling of sensation and responsiveness. Your body begins to require more stimulation to achieve the same level of arousal, leading many men to increase intensity or duration, which only compounds the underlying problem. blood vessels that don't receive adequate recovery time lose their flexibility and responsiveness, creating a cycle where each experience becomes less satisfying than the last. The emotional impact often catches men off guard. What once provided stress relief and pleasure begins to feel mechanical and empty. Many report feeling emotionally disconnected, not just during sexual activity, but in other areas of life as well. This happens because the constant depletion of dopamine and other neurochemicals affects your overall mood regulation and emotional responsiveness. The solution requires viewing sexual activity through the lens of athletic recovery rather than daily routine. Your body needs time to restore hormone levels, repair tissues, and reset neurochemical pathways. A strategic approach involves spacing sexual activity every 48-72 hours, allowing your circulation system to fully recover between sessions. During recovery periods, focus on activities that support cardiovascular health, gentle exercise, proper hydration, and stress reduction. This isn't about deprivation, it's about optimization. When you do engage sexually, your body will be primed for maximum sensitivity, circulation, and satisfaction. Track your energy levels and emotional responsiveness for a few weeks with this adjusted frequency. Most men are surprised to discover that less frequent activity actually results in more intense and satisfying experiences, along with improved mood and energy throughout the day. However, even when men adopt proper timing and breathing techniques, they often compensate for age-related sensitivity changes in a way that creates an entirely different type of circulation damage. The pressure and intensity they use to try to recreate youthful sensations may be causing more harm than they realize. When sensitivity naturally decreases with age, the instinctive response is to compensate with more pressure and intensity. This seems logical. If you can't feel as much, apply more force to recreate familiar sensations. Unfortunately, this well-intentioned adjustment becomes one of the most damaging mistakes men make after 60, creating a destructive cycle that progressively worsens the very problem they're trying to solve. I regularly encounter men who describe an escalating pattern of pressure and force during masturbation. They notice reduced sensitivity, so they grip harder. When that stops working as well, they increase the pressure further. What they don't realize is that each increase in pressure is actually damaging the delicate nerve pathways and blood vessels that create sensation in the first place. The anatomy of the penis makes this particularly problematic. The nerves responsible for sexual sensation are located just beneath the skin surface, protected only by thin layers of tissue. These nerves weren't designed to withstand significant pressure, especially repeatedly over time. When you apply excessive grip pressure, you're compressing these nerve pathways and restricting blood flow to the very tissues that need optimal circulation for proper function. Neurological studies reveal that sustained pressure on penile nerves can cause what's called compression neuropathy, essentially bruising or damage to nerve fibers from being squeezed too forcefully. This damage is often irreversible, leading to progressive numbness and reduced sensitivity. Additionally, the blood vessels that run alongside these nerves become compressed, reducing oxygen and nutrient delivery to the tissues and further compromising nerve health. The physical consequences create a vicious cycle. As pressure damage accumulates, sensitivity continues to decrease, leading to even more forceful stimulation attempts. Men often report that areas which once provided intense pleasure now feel almost numb, requiring increasingly aggressive stimulation to achieve any sensation at all. Some develop chronic aching or soreness in the genital area that persists even when not sexually active. The emotional toll of this progression can be devastating. Men experience growing frustration as techniques that once worked reliably become ineffective. This often leads to feelings of desperation and a willingness to try increasingly extreme approaches to recapture lost sensations. The fear that their sexual function is permanently declining creates anxiety that further interferes with natural arousal and circulation. The solution requires completely retraining your approach to stimulation, focusing on light touch and varied sensations rather than pressure and force. Begin with the lightest possible touch that creates any sensation at all, even if it seems insufficient at first. Use varied movements, temperatures, and textures rather than relying solely on pressure. Your goal is to retrain your nerve pathways to respond to subtle stimulation rather than requiring intense force. This retraining process typically takes several weeks, during which you may feel frustrated by seemingly inadequate sensations. However, damaged nerves can heal when given proper conditions, and blood flow to the area improves dramatically when compression is eliminated. Many men are surprised to discover that they can eventually achieve more intense sensations with gentle touch than they were experiencing with forceful pressure. Practice this light touch approach consistently, resisting the urge to increase pressure when sensations seem weak. Focus on the quality of touch rather than intensity, and be patient with the healing process. Your nerve function and circulation can improve significantly when given the opportunity. But even men who master gentle touch often unknowingly sabotage their progress by extending their sessions far beyond what their aging cardiovascular system can safely handle. The duration of sexual activity becomes another hidden factor in circulation decline. Have you ever noticed feeling unexpectedly drained after what should have been a simple, stress-relieving activity? The fifth mistake that's silently undermining circulation in men over 60 involves duration, specifically extending sexual sessions well beyond what their cardiovascular system can comfortably sustain. What many don't realize is that prolonged arousal becomes exponentially more taxing on an aging body. Statistical analysis from cardiovascular research shows a concerning pattern. Men over 60 who regularly engage in sexual activity lasting longer than 20 minutes show measurably higher rates of chronic fatigue, irregular heart rhythms, and what cardiologists term exercise intolerance in other areas of life. The connection isn't coincidental. Extended sexual arousal places demands on your cardiovascular system similar to moderate aerobic exercise, but without the gradual conditioning that makes such exercise sustainable. Your heart during prolonged sexual arousal works significantly harder than during normal daily activities. Heart rate typically increases 30–50% above resting levels. Blood pressure rises substantially, and your circulation system must maintain increased blood flow to the pelvic region while simultaneously supporting elevated cardiovascular demands throughout your body. In younger men, this is manageable for extended periods. After 60, when heart efficiency naturally declines and blood vessels become less flexible, prolonged arousal becomes a form of cardiovascular stress test that your body may not be equipped to handle. The physical consequences extend far beyond the immediate session. Many men report feeling unusually tired for hours or even days after extended sexual activity, experiencing what feels like a hangover effect. This isn't psychological. It's the result of depleted energy reserves, overtaxed circulation, and the inflammatory response that occurs when your cardiovascular system is pushed beyond its optimal capacity. Your body requires significantly more recovery time after these marathon sessions, affecting your energy levels and overall vitality. The emotional aftermath often surprises men who expect to feel relaxed and satisfied after sexual release. Instead, they experience what researchers call post-orgasmic depression, a mood drop that can last 24 to 48 hours after extended sessions. This occurs because prolonged arousal depletes neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, while simultaneously triggering stress hormones that your aging body processes less efficiently than in younger years. The solution involves recognizing that optimal sexual health after 60 requires working with your body's limitations rather than against them. Research indicates that 10–15 minutes represents the sweet spot for sexual activity in men over 60, long enough for full arousal and satisfaction, but short enough to avoid cardiovascular overexertion and neurotransmitter depletion. This doesn't mean rushing through the experience, but rather focusing on quality over quantity. Use the warm-up and breathing techniques we've discussed to maximize sensitivity and circulation efficiency within this time frame. Many men discover that shorter, more focused sessions actually provide more intense and satisfying experiences than the extended sessions that left them feeling drained. Set a gentle timer or mental goal of completing your sexual activity within 15 minutes. If you haven't reached climax within this time frame, it's better to pause and try again another day than to push your cardiovascular system beyond its healthy limits. Your energy levels, mood, and long-term sexual health will benefit significantly from this disciplined approach. However, even when men optimize their timing and technique, they often unknowingly compromise their circulation through something as basic as body positioning. The way you position yourself during sexual activity can either support healthy blood flow or create dangerous restrictions that compound all the other circulation challenges we've discussed. The sixth circulation-damaging mistake often goes completely unnoticed because it seems so basic: the physical positions men choose during masturbation. What appears to be a simple matter of comfort and convenience can actually create dangerous compression of major blood vessels, turning what should be a circulation-enhancing activity into one that restricts blood flow precisely when you need it most. Vascular imaging studies reveal alarming patterns in men who consistently use certain positions during sexual activity. Sitting hunched forward, lying with legs pressed together, or positioning the body in ways that compress the femoral arteries or pelvic blood vessels can reduce circulation to the genital area by up to 40%. For men over 60, whose circulation is already compromised by age-related arterial changes, this additional restriction can push blood flow below the threshold needed for healthy sexual function. The mechanics of blood flow to the pelvic region depend on unobstructed pathways through several major vessel groups. The internal pudendal arteries, which supply blood directly to the penis, branch off from vessels that run through the pelvis and down the legs. When you position your body in ways that compress these pathways, such as sitting with thighs pressed tightly together or lying in twisted positions that compress the groin area, you're essentially crimping the very blood supply your sexual function depends on. Many men report experiencing numbness, tingling, or reduced sensation during or after sexual activity, often attributing these symptoms to age or decreased sensitivity. However, these are frequently signs of positional circulation restriction. In more severe cases, prolonged compression of blood vessels during sexual activity can contribute to the formation of small blood clots or varicose veins in the pelvic region, creating long-term circulation problems that extend beyond sexual function. The physical discomfort created by poor positioning often goes unrecognized during sexual activity because arousal can mask the early warning signs of circulation restriction. Men may notice that they need to shift positions frequently, experience cramping or stiffness afterward, or feel like they can't maintain comfortable arousal for extended periods. These symptoms indicate that blood flow is being compromised by positional choices. The emotional impact manifests as a gradual loss of enjoyment and spontaneity in sexual activity. When positioning becomes uncomfortable or when physical symptoms interfere with arousal, the entire experience becomes more effortful and less satisfying. Many men begin to avoid sexual activity or rush through it to minimize discomfort, which compounds the other circulation problems we've discussed. The solution involves adopting positions that promote rather than restrict blood flow. Lying on your back with legs slightly separated and uncrossed allows optimal blood flow through the femoral and pelvic arteries. If you prefer sitting, ensure your thighs aren't pressed together and that your torso remains relatively upright rather than hunched forward. Avoid any position that creates pressure or compression in the groin, inner thigh, or lower abdominal areas. Change positions if you notice any numbness, tingling, or discomfort during activity. These are early warning signs that circulation is being compromised. Take a moment to adjust your position and allow blood flow to normalize before continuing. Consider using supportive pillows or cushions to maintain circulation-friendly positioning without requiring muscular effort that might create tension and further restrict blood flow. Practice good positioning during non-sexual activities as well. How you sit at your desk, watch television, or sleep can all affect your baseline pelvic circulation. The better your overall circulation patterns, the more resilient your system will be during sexual activity. Even when men perfect their positioning, timing, and technique, many unknowingly create another form of tissue damage through inadequate attention to a basic physiological need. The oversight of proper lubrication becomes increasingly critical after 60, yet it's often the most neglected aspect of sexual health. The seventh mistake involves something so basic that many men never consider it a health issue: the absence of adequate lubrication during masturbation. What worked fine for decades without additional moisture becomes a source of tissue damage and infection risk after 60. Yet most men continue with dry stimulation until serious problems develop. Dermatological research on aging skin reveals why this becomes critical after 60. The skin of the penis undergoes significant changes with age. It becomes thinner, loses elasticity, and produces less natural moisture. The sebaceous glands that once provided adequate lubrication during sexual activity decrease their output substantially. Additionally, conditions like diabetes, which affects nearly 30% of men over 60, further compromise skin integrity and healing capacity, making the genital area particularly vulnerable to damage from friction. Without adequate lubrication, every stroke during masturbation creates microscopic tears in the delicate skin tissue. These microtears may be invisible to the naked eye, but they provide entry points for bacteria and create inflammatory responses that damage the underlying blood vessels and nerve endings. Over time, this leads to scar tissue formation, reduced sensitivity, and increased susceptibility to infections. The physical consequences often develop so gradually that men don't connect them to their masturbation habits. They may notice increased soreness, small cuts or irritation that seem to appear randomly, or recurring minor infections in the genital area. Some develop chronic inflammation that makes the skin appear reddened or feel persistently tender. Men with diabetes face particularly serious risks, as their compromised immune systems and slower healing rates can turn minor tissue damage into serious infections. The emotional impact extends beyond physical discomfort. When sexual activity consistently results in soreness or irritation, the brain begins to associate sexual arousal with pain rather than pleasure. This creates unconscious tension and anxiety during sexual activity, which further restricts blood flow and compounds circulation problems. Many men report beginning to avoid or rush through sexual activity to minimize discomfort, sacrificing both pleasure and the potential circulation benefits of healthy sexual function. The solution requires adopting a lubrication protocol appropriate for aging skin and changing physiology. High-quality, long-lasting lubricants designed for sensitive skin should be applied before any direct genital contact. Water-based lubricants work well for most men, but those with particularly dry or sensitive skin may benefit from silicone-based options that provide longer-lasting protection. Apply lubrication generously, more than seems necessary. Reapply during longer sessions if you notice any increase in friction or discomfort. Pay particular attention to areas that receive the most contact, and don't hesitate to stop and add more lubrication if needed. Think of this as essential maintenance for healthy tissue rather than an optional enhancement. Choose lubricants without harsh chemicals, fragrances, or numbing agents that might mask important warning signs of tissue damage. Some men benefit from lubricants that include moisturizing ingredients like vitamin E or aloe vera, which can help maintain skin health beyond the immediate sexual activity. Develop a post-activity care routine that includes gentle cleaning and, if needed, application of a mild moisturizer to help maintain skin integrity between sexual activities. This is particularly important for men with diabetes or other conditions that affect skin healing and immune function. The transformation in comfort, sensation, and long-term genital health that results from proper lubrication often surprises men who have suffered through years of unnecessary friction damage. Your skin can heal and regains sensitivity when protected from ongoing trauma, leading to more pleasurable experiences and better overall sexual health. But even with perfect technique, timing, and physical care, many men unknowingly sabotage their progress through poor timing choices that disrupt the very biological rhythms their sexual health depends on. Consider when you typically engage in sexual activity and how you feel afterward. The eighth critical mistake involves timing, specifically late-night masturbation, that disrupts the very sleep cycles your body needs for healthy circulation and hormone production. What seems like a natural way to unwind before bed can actually sabotage the restorative processes that maintain your sexual health. Sleep research reveals a complex relationship between sexual activity timing and sleep quality in older adults. When sexual activity occurs within 2 hours of intended sleep time, it triggers a hormonal cascade that can interfere with natural sleep rhythms. The combination of elevated heart rate, increased body temperature, and neurochemical changes that accompany sexual climax creates a state of alertness that directly opposes the gradual wind-down your aging body requires for deep, restorative sleep. The neurochemistry involved explains why this timing becomes more problematic after 60. Sexual climax triggers the release of several hormones, including prolactin, which typically promotes sleepiness, but also norepinephrine and dopamine, which increase alertness. In younger men, the sleep-promoting effects usually dominate. However, aging brains process these competing signals less efficiently, often resulting in a state of tired alertness where you feel physically exhausted but mentally stimulated. Chronic sleep disruption from poorly timed sexual activity creates cascading physical consequences that directly impact your circulation and sexual health. Poor sleep quality reduces testosterone production, which occurs primarily during deep sleep phases. It also impairs the cellular repair processes that maintain blood vessel health and compromises your immune system's ability to manage inflammation. Men who regularly engage in late-night sexual activity often develop a pattern of fragmented sleep that prevents their bodies from completing essential restoration cycles. The daytime consequences extend far beyond feeling tired. Many men report experiencing unexplained irritability, difficulty concentrating, and reduced motivation for physical intimacy with partners. They often don't connect these symptoms to their nighttime masturbation timing, instead attributing them to general aging or stress. The fatigue and mood changes can strain relationships and create a cycle where sexual activity becomes more isolated and mechanical rather than connected and fulfilling. The solution involves strategic timing that works with your body's natural rhythms rather than against them. Research indicates that morning or early afternoon sexual activity provides optimal benefits without disrupting sleep cycles. Morning sessions, in particular, can take advantage of naturally higher testosterone levels while providing energy and mood benefits that last throughout the day. If evening sexual activity is your preference, complete it at least 3 hours before your intended bedtime. This allows sufficient time for your heart rate to normalize, body temperature to decrease, and stimulating hormones to metabolize before sleep. Follow sexual activity with calming activities like reading or gentle stretching rather than stimulating screen time or intense conversations. Create a consistent evening routine that signals to your body that it's time to begin winding down for sleep. This might include dimming lights, avoiding screens, and engaging in relaxing activities that help transition from the alertness of sexual activity to the calm state needed for restorative sleep. Monitor your sleep quality and daytime energy levels as you adjust your sexual activity timing. Most men notice significant improvements in both sleep depth and daytime vitality when they optimize this timing. Better sleep leads to improved testosterone production, enhanced circulation, and greater overall sexual health, creating a positive cycle that reinforces healthy patterns. However, even when men perfect their physical technique and timing, they often remain trapped by mental and emotional patterns that may be more damaging to their long-term sexual health than all the physical mistakes combined. The psychological approach to sexual activity after 60 requires as much attention as the physical mechanics. The ninth mistake represents perhaps the most psychologically damaging habit affecting men's circulation and intimacy after 60: reliance on increasingly extreme visual stimulation that rewires the brain's arousal patterns in ways that can permanently alter sexual response. Modern internet pornography provides levels of visual intensity that simply didn't exist for most of these men's formative years, and the aging brain's response to this artificial stimulation creates profound changes in both neurochemistry and circulation. Neuroscience research on aging brains and pornography consumption reveals alarming patterns. Men over 60 who regularly consume high-intensity visual pornography show measurable changes in dopamine receptor sensitivity and neural pathway activation. The brain's reward system, already compromised by natural aging processes, becomes further desensitized to normal levels of sexual stimulation. This creates a dependency on increasingly extreme visual content to achieve the same neurochemical response that once occurred naturally through physical sensation alone. The mechanism behind this brain rewiring directly impacts circulation and physical sexual function. When arousal becomes dependent on extreme visual stimulation rather than physical sensation, the brain's signals to the cardiovascular system become confused and inefficient. The natural cascade of neurochemical signals that promote healthy blood flow to the genitals becomes disrupted, requiring artificial visual intensity to trigger what should be automatic physiological responses. Many men describe a troubling progression where they find themselves needing more extreme content to achieve arousal, while simultaneously losing the ability to respond to real-world physical stimulation. They report that touch from a partner feels inadequate, that their imagination no longer generates arousal, and that sexual activity without visual stimulation becomes difficult or impossible. This represents a fundamental rewiring of the arousal pathways that took decades to develop naturally. The physical consequences extend beyond reduced sensitivity to include measurable changes in circulation patterns during arousal. Men dependent on extreme visual stimulation often show irregular blood flow responses, where circulation increases rapidly in response to visual cues but fails to maintain steady flow during physical activity. This creates an unstable foundation for sexual function that becomes increasingly unreliable with age. The emotional and relational impact can be devastating. Men report feeling disconnected from partners, unable to maintain intimacy without artificial stimulation, and increasingly isolated in their sexual experiences. The shame and secrecy surrounding pornography use often prevents them from seeking help or communicating with partners about the changes they're experiencing. This isolation compounds the problem, creating a cycle where pornography becomes both the cause of sexual dysfunction and the primary outlet for sexual expression. The solution requires a gradual retraining process that allows the brain's natural arousal pathways to recover and strengthen. Begin by reducing the intensity and frequency of visual stimulation rather than attempting to eliminate it entirely at first. This might involve choosing less extreme content, limiting viewing time, or introducing periods of sexual activity without any visual aids. Focus on redeveloping sensitivity to physical sensation by practicing arousal through touch, imagination, and memory rather than visual stimulation. This process typically takes several months, during which you may experience reduced arousal capacity. However, the brain's neuroplasticity allows these natural pathways to strengthen again when given the opportunity. Consider implementing regular periods of complete abstinence from visual stimulation, perhaps 1 week per month initially, gradually extending these periods as your natural response patterns recover. During these times, focus on mindful awareness of physical sensations and emotional states during arousal. The recovery process often reveals how much more satisfying and emotionally fulfilling natural arousal patterns can be compared to the artificial intensity of extreme visual stimulation. Many men report that while the process requires patience and commitment, The return of natural sexual responsiveness dramatically improves both solo experiences and intimate relationships. However, even men who successfully address all these physical and psychological factors often miss the most fundamental element that ties everything together, one that determines whether sexual activity enhances or diminishes overall health and life satisfaction. The 10th and most overlooked mistake cuts to the heart of why so many men over 60 struggle with sexual satisfaction despite perfect technique. Treating masturbation as a purely mechanical, physical act divorced from emotional connection and relationship context. This disconnection from the emotional and relational aspects of sexuality creates incomplete arousal responses that undermine both physical circulation and psychological well-being. Psychophysiology research demonstrates that emotional arousal and physical arousal are inseparably linked through complex neural pathways that become even more interdependent with age. The autonomic nervous system, which controls circulation and arousal responses, is directly influenced by emotional states, social connection, and psychological context. When sexual activity becomes purely mechanical, focused solely on physical release without emotional engagement, it fails to activate the full spectrum of neurochemical and cardiovascular responses that create optimal circulation and satisfaction. Many men describe their sexual experiences as feeling hollow or disconnected, even when they follow all the physical recommendations perfectly. They report going through the motions without experiencing the deeper satisfaction or stress relief they remember from earlier years. This isn't simply nostalgia. It's the physiological consequence of separating physical sexual function from its emotional and relational context. The cardiovascular system responds dramatically differently to emotionally engaged versus mechanically focused sexual activity. Research shows that sexual arousal accompanied by feelings of connection, appreciation, or emotional warmth produces more robust and sustained circulation responses than purely physical stimulation. The heart rate patterns, blood pressure changes, and blood flow distribution all optimize when sexual activity occurs within an emotionally positive context. Without emotional engagement, sexual activity often becomes a source of increased loneliness and disconnection rather than stress relief and satisfaction. Men report feeling more isolated after sexual activity, experiencing what researchers term post-orgasmic dysphoria, a mood drop that occurs when physical release isn't accompanied by emotional fulfillment. This emotional aftermath can create negative associations with sexual activity itself, leading to avoidance or increasingly mechanical approaches that compound the problem. The solution involves cultivating emotional awareness and connection during sexual activity, whether partnered or solo. Begin by setting an intention beyond physical release, perhaps stress relief, self-care, or maintaining connection with your own sexuality. Take time before and during sexual activity to appreciate your body, acknowledge your emotional state, and maintain awareness of the experience rather than rushing toward completion. For men in relationships, this might involve discussing sexual needs and experiences with partners, sharing fantasies or emotional states, and treating sexual activity as an opportunity for deeper connection rather than just physical maintenance. Even for men without current partners, maintaining an emotional connection to sexuality helps preserve the neural pathways that link physical and emotional arousal. Practice gratitude and mindfulness during sexual experiences. Notice sensations, emotions, and thoughts without judgment. This awareness helps activate the full range of neurochemical responses that optimize both circulation and satisfaction. Many men discover that this emotional engagement actually enhances physical sensations and creates more fulfilling experiences than purely mechanical approaches ever provided. Consider sexual activity as an investment in your overall emotional and relational health, not just physical relief. This perspective shift often naturally leads to more mindful, connected experiences that provide both better circulation benefits and greater psychological satisfaction. The integration of emotional awareness with physical technique creates a foundation for sexual health that can actually improve with age rather than deteriorate. When men approach sexuality as a holistic aspect of health and connection, they often discover that their later years can provide more satisfying and physically beneficial sexual experiences than they had in their youth. Your circulation, your satisfaction, and your overall well-being depend not just on what you do, but how and why you do it. The choice to integrate emotional awareness with physical care represents the final step in reclaiming sexual health that serves your body, mind, and relationships for years to come.